Australia going to Sri Lanka, Finger Boys style, squads out. Ooh, I've got some feelings, but I'm gonna wait. Thoughts?
Oh, I don't know. Like, I was in Bangladesh in 2017 when the whole narrative was we're using this series to use it as a springboard to India later that year. And, they got turned over in the first test at Dhaka. And is this how this feels to me? A little bit it does. I mean, what's going on with Pete Handscomb not being in the squad? The vibe seems to be that if this was relevant to the World Test Championship final qualification, then Australia would have a different team. All right. I kind of understand medium-term planning. We've spoken about that last year quite a bit in reference to Jimmy Anderson and what England were trying to do with their bowling attack and putting test matches into bowlers at the right time to win in Australia. So on that basis, I can kind of see it. But, where does Nathan McSweeney find himself in the pecking order ahead of Peter Handscomb as the spare bat in this squad? I just don't. I don't see it.
On a spin
and that's nothing against McSweeney, right? It's just due to the fact that Handscomb earned another chance to play Test cricket in these conditions. He's still clearly at the peak of his powers. You can debate what his peak is, but in 2024, as we talked about a couple of weeks ago, no one made it to 50 more times in the world than Handscomb last year, and he's had some fine performances for Victoria in the Sheffield Shield so far this year. So, I mean, I get that things changed a lot with Bo Webster. Timing is run to perfection. The intervention of Sam Constas with those couple of test matches against India, and they want to have him in the team right now. I kind of get it, although personally, I probably would have just stuck with Khawaja and Head opening in those conditions. I would have stuck with plan A and said to Constas, great, loved your work, enjoyed what you've done, have a breather. We'll see you at the World Test Championship final. Go get a contract with Derbyshire or with Middlesex and go play some Division 2 county cricket for 5 weeks and use that as your lead in rather than playing on a couple of Bunsons in Sri Lanka. No wrist spinner. There's a lot of chat about Zampa being in the frame. So it's very samey. I mean, I know that they're trying to bring Murphy and Kuhneman on, and Murphy did a great job playing Test cricket in 2023, and they want to have that support for Lyon. But I took it as read there'd be a wrist spinner in the squad. And then, of course, there's the question of Cooper Connolly jumping Glenn Maxwell in the queue, which is an emotive topic for all of us in different ways. But no one doubts that Cooper Connolly's got a big future ahead of him. But is he playing? Or is Australia playing two quicks? Are they playing two quicks? Are they going back to plan A like they did in Sri Lanka last time and as they did at Nagpur in 2023 and starting with Stark and Boland? I know it was Cummins and Boland in Nagpur, but are they starting with two seamers and only playing Lyon plus one other? That'd be quite conservative, I reckon, given we have a pretty good sense of how these pitches are likely to be set up with Prabhav Jayasuriya being such a force at goal in the last 2 years. So there's some starting thoughts for you.
I don't mind them having an option for a second quick, you have one in the squad. I think, Stark is, I mean, if they were only going one, there'd be an argument that Stark should bowl ahead of Cummins, and Cummins would have only bowled if he was captain had he gone, but he's not going. So that removes that problem. I mean, Stark if you've got those sort of rough pitches, he's got airspeed, he's got swing, potentially with a new ball, and then he's got the potential to reverse an old ball. So he's someone who can be a weapon on those pitches. Boland can just bowl dry on those, but then he's basically doing the job of a spinner. So I'm not sure I see the point in playing both of them. And then the Handscomb bit is perplexing given how well he played in spinning conditions, and he talked to us on the show about not wanting to be pigeonholed as a spin specialist, but he was still a bloody good spin option in India, and like you say, he did the work with stacking up the runs. This feels more like an apology to McSweeney for dicking him around during the home summer and asking him to do a hard job. And then the Cooper Connolly thing is absurd. It is absolutely absurd. And I know that people can listen to this show and say, oh, well, you just want Maxwell to get in because you like Maxwell. The reason we talked about Maxwell so much on this show is that for 10 years, we started from a position of saying we want Maxwell to get in the Test team because we want to see what he could do with opportunities at Test level. And I mean, that remains the case. You can talk about him not playing any Shield cricket and all the rest of it. That's because he's been in white ball teams and hasn't been able to. You know who else hasn't played any Shield cricket? Cooper Connolly. Like, for fuck's sake, he's played 4 first-class matches in his career. And, yeah, he looks great, and I'm excited about his future as well. I was excited that he was on the white ball trip to England, and they barely trusted him enough to give him a hit. They put him in that T20 game and didn't let him bat, pushed him all the way down the order. He played a couple of the ODIs and made a few runs here or there, but he's not an all-rounder. So he comes in, he plays a Shield final and makes 90 and 18 on debut. Amazing. Debut in a Shield final. Love it. Comes in for the start of the next season and has a couple of decent games there, 79 and 30 not out, and then he made 55 against Tassie. That's it. Those are the only Shield games he's ever played. On that basis, he gets into the India A, Australia A game, makes 37 there. He's never bowled more than 6 overs in any of those games. He's bowled an over here, 4 overs there, 4 overs, 1 over, and 6 overs in. And he hasn't even bowled in every innings that he's first-class matches that he's played in. He's never taken a wicket. He is not a backup spin option at this point. Like it is misleading. It's a lie to say that he can be considered as a backup spin option when he hasn't played first-class cricket and he hasn't spun the ball in first-class cricket. So what are you doing? What are you bringing him for? This feels like, we've got to bring the kid along to give him a taste of Test cricket by being in the squad, and he can come along and have a little holiday and feel close to it. But on what basis? Like how hard? It just sends a signal that you don't actually have to do anything in Australian cricket to get picked in the Test squad at that point. Like that's a very cheap ticket to a Test tour. And perhaps I'm being sentimental about it, but I think that Maxwell has done enough work and enough service for Australian cricket over a long, long journey when trying to be part of something like that would mean a lot to him. That's not why you pick a Test team, but he's somebody who could still offer something as a genuine spin option, a genuine backup spin option, and as the kind of player who on really difficult turning surfaces could make 60 or 80 runs in quick time that you need. You've had Australian selectors across a bunch of different bands across 10, 12 years talk about the need to find aggressive counter-punching middle-order bats and people who can contribute with the ball, and they still refuse to pick the guy who most clearly fits the bill while they've gone through a parade of other players. Connolly's just the latest. But it is absolutely ridiculous that he's got a spot on this Test tour. I think it's disgraceful.
Yeah, and it'll never be said as explicitly as this, but if Australia lost at Sydney and these Test matches were absolutely live, a necessity to win, then I think they're picking Maxwell. I think if these are live, I think the conversation's different, and it kind of bolsters your point there. And having just given such a fillip to the Sheffield Shield with the selection of Beau Webster, having banged the door down after a decade and having, timed his run immaculately. And I'm glad Webster's in the squad and given an opportunity here. Although his own credentials against the spinning board, it's a whole different conversation, right? It'll be hard yakka for him out there. But the fact that I think he should open the bowling over there and it should be one seamer. And there is a third seamer in the squad as well, by the way, Sean Abbott. That's kind of why I think they'll play 2, because they wouldn't take 3 plus Webster if they were planning on necessarily playing 1 out. And remembering that Cummins isn't there because not only the birth of his second child, but also the ankle issue that we were told he was managing through the Border Gavaskar. So that wasn't publicly known until after the series. But they're saying that they're trying to make sure that he's right for the Champions Trophy and of course, a heavy workload through the rest of 2025. So that all makes a lot of sense to me. But yeah, it just this too smart by half thing. It's like, well, some Test matches can, and look, the other thing here is that even if they win 2-0, they can't jump South Africa. I did ponder that. I had a look at it. The highest they can get to is 67%, and South Africa are in the clubhouse with 69%. So the only reason I raised that is finishing first. Top. Oh, no, there is, because even with a 6-day Test match, you could have it rained off it, and then the top team wins. So I assume the top team wins. I assume they don't split the mace after 6 days. Maybe I'm wrong. I just took it as read that would be the case. But, either way, I'm just making the point that this being genuinely a dead rubber for World Test Championship reasons means that they're casting forward to the next tour of India in 2027 with this. There's no denying that this is part of the conversation and the expectation that Connolly will grow into that squad in a more fulsome way between now and then. But yeah, it does seem cruel that if the Test match needed to be won, or if the Test series needed to be won, that there would have been an opportunity for Maxwell. But on account of the fact that there's less riding on it, there isn't the opportunity. And just to cover off one last time on this Shield thing, I saw someone the other week banging on about this usual renter quote type about he doesn't play Shield cricket, right? He's a nationally contracted player. Since the Big Bash started, the way that it got slotted into the national calendar, Australia's white ball tours have almost always clashed with the Sheffield Shield at the shoulders of the season in October into November and in February into March. There's so often white ball cricket. And Maxi can't say as a nationally contracted cricketer, oh, sorry, guys, I'll just sit this one out because I want to play in the Shield instead. That's not how it works in reality. You're employed by Cricket Australia to do what is your primary role, which is to make runs for the Australian cricket team and take wickets in Maxwell's case as well, and to prepare yourself for those high-profile tournaments, right? So there was never any ambiguity about him being in the Champions Trophy, for example, and that'll mean that there is obviously no way, therefore, he could play Shield cricket this season. And he did have a crack at trying to play some red ball cricket this year, both the Shield games at the very, very start, which Cricket Australia saw fit to manage him away from, and that's a shame in hindsight, because I think that it would have been great had they given him a chance, although his body did take a few knocks in England. And the Victorian second 11 game, and then the terribly timed hamstring tear, which meant that he had to miss the PM's 11, which got turned into a one-dayer anyway, so let's not overplay the importance of that game. But yeah, he's been stiff here. Wish Connolly well. But yeah, let's not pretend, say it's something that it isn't. And the selectors will never acknowledge that, by the way. They'll never say that if there was more riding on it that Maxwell would play. That's not that level of candor isn't something that we expect from people that are in positions like this. They'll hold the party line, but I think we can all add two and two together.
Yeah. I mean, look, I'll be astonished if Connolly plays, if he does.
Me too.
And like I say, there's no negativity towards him. I think he's super exciting, and I'm looking forward to seeing what he can turn into. But I can't see how they're picking him in an 11, and I can't see how they're trusting him to bowl any overs in a Test match.
Just one more thing. I'm glad to see Josh Inglis is in the squad. He's recovered from his calf strain at Melbourne that he picked up when sub-fielding. Inglis should play. He's a gun against spin. He's been making runs in the top 6 in Shield cricket this year. He's demonstrated his ability to bat in really tough circumstances for Australia going back to the 23 World Cup. Have a huge amount of admiration for how Constas proved a disruptor in that series at the perfect time, and that worked fine. But if Head and Khawaja as the opening combination is what worked for them the last time they're in the subcontinent, I can't see why they would move away from that in order to put Test matches into Constas at this juncture. And especially if it compromises Inglis' spot in the team, I suppose is what I'm getting to here. So they can set it up any which way they want, but Head and Khawaja opening to be followed by Labuschagne and Smith, as we'd expect, and then some flexibility with where Webster might bat. But I would want to see Webster and Inglis fill the 5th and 6th spots in that batting lineup before the wicketkeeper Carey, and then the usual allotment of bowlers, whether they go with 3 spinners or 2. I think that is the reasonable thing, that Inglis would play ahead of both McSweeney but also Constas. Yeah,
I mean, he's got the dynamism, the versatility, and I suppose if you're losing Travis Head from the middle order, but you're replacing him with a Travis Head-like player in terms of the ability to get on with things. So, plenty of options as to how they can set up an 11 there. There's no jumping Jai because he's getting his shoulder fixed up, which makes sense, and sort of sending him to Sri Lanka wasn't necessarily likely to help him. But there's the hope. I mean, we feel like we've been waiting for Jai to jump back into the frame for years and years and years. He's 28 years old now. He seemed like such a youngster when he came through. Initially swinging the ball both ways at pace, but he was composed and articulate and interesting, and I was really looking forward to seeing the career that he might have, and it's kept being postponed at international level. But there is that thought of the Ashes coming. He was around last time the Ashes happened in Australia, and if they can keep his arms attached, he might be around again.
I reckon they'll need him next year. You're putting another year on the clock of Stark and Hazelwood and Cummins, and of course Boland will be 37 then as well. You can't assume that guys who are that old are going to get through 5 Test matches in 6.5 weeks. So I'm glad they've made this proactive decision. I really want to see him back. He, looks like a mini Dale Steyn when he burst on the scene as a 21-year-old Jeff in that first Test match he played at Brisbane, going back to early 19. So, hopefully this is the right time to pull him out. the other interesting point in that statement was about how he couldn't field well. Like, it was to do with like the all round package of what Richardson offers with an incapacitated shoulder over that he's been managing for ages. So
he did his shoulder in that ODI, didn't he? Diving.
Yep.
Diving
in Pakistan,
the
in the UAE. But he did it. No, he did it before the 19 World Cup. I mean, it's a long time ago now, but before the 19 World Cup, he was in the squad and did a shoulder in the UAE when they were playing Pakistan, which ruled him out of the rest of that year, which was the start of the string of injuries. So anyway, good luck to Jai Richardson. He's also not, therefore, in the Champions Trophy squad, which came out today, Jeff. A few bits and pieces here. Jake Fraser-McGurk hasn't made the cut. It would have been wrong had he made the cut, right? No one doubts that Fraser-McGurk's going to play shitloads of cricket for Australia, but he's not made a run for a year. 9 months. So that's okay. He's young. He'll be fine. Marcus Stoinis is there again. He's, as that joke on Twitter goes, he is older than James Faulkner, and Marcus Stoinis is still getting about. We thought his ODI career might be done, but he's back there in that squad of 15. They can tweak it. It's the provisional squad, so they've named Cummins as captain, and they've named Hazelwood as well, but they'll have the flexibility to tweak that if one or both of them don't get up from their niggles.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, that's interesting, isn't it, to see how that might pan out. I suppose Nathan Ellis gets, particularly if that happens, he gets the opportunity to be more of a leader with the ball coming in. They've got Aaron Hardy there, who looks so good in England as well, and more of a senior role for him. Mitchell Starc in the side, important. I mean, 50 over cricket feels so sidelined a lot of the time when we're not in World Cup season. So there is that aspect of it. It's interesting that they've got the Labuschagne-Smith axis, given that worked in the World Cup in India. They'll sort of bank on that to work again, where Australia's not going for the absolutely colossal scores, but wanting some firefighters to put things out, when they're in the middle of an innings where things can get tricky on those kind of surfaces. So that part is interesting, and the format doesn't give you much room for making mistakes, unlike the World Cup, where you can qualify for the semi-finals on 4 wins out of 9.
Yeah, if you lose your first game, you're right up against it in the Champions Trophy. So, yeah, it's a senior team. It's an experienced team. Not a lot of young blood in there. Mitch Marsh is back, of course, as well. Not that he wouldn't be, but there's every chance Mitch Marsh captains that team if Cummins doesn't get back from the ankle. And then, the usual suspects in Mitchell Starc and Adam Zampa, who've been so instrumental to Australia's white ball success. Glenn Maxwell likewise. But, I'm looking forward to seeing Nathan Ellis with more responsibility. I think his ceiling is extremely high. His skills in T20 cricket are as good as anyone going around. So it might well be that along with Starc, he's kind of leading the attack in Pakistan, which won't be easy. So one thing at a time, but good chance for him. And what you say about Smith and Labuschagne stands to reason as well. They've played so little 50 over cricket since the World Cup that there's almost there's also a procedural fairness point here on them having been in that squad back then and having not really found a way to fall out of it. I don't know if that still applies when there's such a gap between tournaments, but that will start soon. Shakib Al-Hassan won't be in Pakistan, Jeff.
No.
He was going to be returning to the Bangladesh team for it, having not played for a time because of reasons. One of them being that he's been suspended for chucking at Loughborough late last year. He went for a second test. The first independent test he could access was one in Chennai. So I guess that's the University of WA campus in India.
Must be WA Chennai, a destination campus. Everybody wants to get there.
But he's not passed the test again. So he's still chucking it, which means that Bangladesh have not picked him as a specialist batter, which is interesting.
And it is remarkable at the very near the end, or this could be the end of such a long international career. They've never played a tournament without him since he debuted Bangladesh. He's played every ICC tournament since he debuted, which was 2007, was it, I think, from memory?
Yep.
So he's been around for bloody ever, and apparently his arm got bendy just in the last year or so, which seems interesting. And it's that county cricket stint that he had, where the one game stint he went over and got called. So I hope he got paid fucking well for that one game that he played for Surrey, because it's brought him all sorts of trouble now.
Yeah, he was. You go back a long time to find form lines from the Champions Trophy, but it was Bangladesh who made the semis in 2017, thanks to Shakib beating New Zealand, wasn't it? That was the big chase when they were 4 for not many, day after the election, the day after the 2017 election. I remember that well.
They beat South Africa, didn't they? They chased 330 or so against South Africa as well. Bangladesh.
That might have been the World Cup in 19. But you're right, 17 Champions Trophy. They had 2 close wins. One of them was against New Zealand.
That's all I remember. It might have been 2019.
Yeah. Shakib was right in the middle of all of that.
Well, he was. That's when he fell in love with Surrey. That's when he said, "I want to come back and I want to play one game for you guys. It's going to ruin the rest of my career." Down at the UWA, Amy Maguire's going to the UWA as well out of that India series before. She's the young spinner, another left arm spinner. So the left armers are having trouble. So she's been supported for a suspect action. And Fakhar Zaman is trying to mount a comeback, having won Pakistan the Champions Trophy last time around with that 100 that he made in the final. He's gunning for a spot in the Pakistan squad. I'm not sure if that squad's been announced yet, but he was talking a big game about how he was going to be in it. So I hope he's in it. I hope he does it again. Get out there and do it again.
I admire the young Irish spinner Amy Maguire for trying to get to 15 degrees. I mean, we learnt from our conversation there that there is it's measurable that the further up the pyramid you are, the more likely it is that you use your 15 degrees. She's just trying to get to the top of her game. And if she's gone too far, that's fine. They can wind it back.
You can pull it back.
The Big Bash League, Jeff, business end coming. Thunder won tonight. So they're on 11 points with the Sixers and the Hurricanes. But the Melbourne Stars, they're doing what RCB did in the IPL last year. They've won 4 on the trot. They're in the 4. They've only got, I think, 1 game to go. Yeah, they play 10, don't they? 10 regular season games. The Heat have got a game in hand, and the Renegades have got a better net run rate than the Stars, and they've got a game in hand as well, and they're 2 points behind. So they could still yet fall out of it. But the Stars, who have largely been able to vault themselves into this position due to a bloke called Glenn Maxwell. He made 50-odd in a hurry earlier in the week when he was left out of the Test squad. He responded with it was a thrilling win, actually. There was some late drama against the Sixers, and he took a couple of important outfield catches in a row, and after getting them up to 170-odd, which proved defendable. And then last night at the G, hit 10 sixes out of his 90, absolutely exploded on a track where nobody else made more than 26 in the whole match. And the Sixers, was it the Sixers? I can't remember anymore. No, it couldn't have been the Sixers. It must have been another team because it was the Brisbane Heat. No, it wasn't them either. Fucked if I know. It was somebody. Believe me when I say it was somebody. It was the Renegades. They were playing at Colonial Stadium. They were playing at Death Valley. They got rolled for 123 with Tim Seifert top scoring with 26, and no one else in the game was able to do anything with the bat apart from Maxwell's 90 from 52, which has been described by those who watch it closely as one of the greatest Big Bash innings ever played.
It was brutal. I mean, the consistency of the 6 hitting was absurd. There's that absolutely huge one over the leg side, but it made me think that I think Maxwell will be misremembered slightly because, people will think Maxwell, they'll think reverses, switchies, they'll think, Asmatullah, no feet, switch hit over deep third. And then secondarily, they'll think about the clean out shot that he does over mid wicket where he sort of picks up the full ball that's in at his toes and somehow does that Gumby leg thing where he sort of, his legs go plasticine and he gets the leg out the way and then picks it up over the leg side. But it really reinforced, it brought back to me like how much I think the underrated Glenn Maxwell bit is the stuff over cover, because he's so clean over cover. He just doesn't do it in an orthodox looking cover driving way. So often it's the bat way outside the line of the body and picking up the ball. Sometimes it's that full, he manages to dig those Yorkers out and you just use the wrists and kind of snap the wrists around and slap them over cover. But he hits sixes over the offside in that way that just makes it look absurdly easy when he goes over wide long off or over extra cover. It's such a feature of his game and I think one that almost nobody associates with him. That's not how you think about him playing, but it is such a big part of it.
I also liked that some of those sixes went over 100 metres. Like when we were going through the Mumbai Miracle with the book, he talked me through how he practices to hit the ball a long way and he doesn't try and hit the cover off it. He talks about 80% of his, he swings 80% rather than 100% in order to hit the ball somewhere between 80 and 90 metres. That's his metric. It's like if I'm in rhythm, swinging it at 8 out of 10 strength, I will be able to hit it for 6. I don't need to hit it 100 meters. It doesn't, you don't get any more runs for smacking it that far. But last night, a couple of them went fucking miles. One was 122 meters. So there was, as you say, there's some brutality to it as well. And getting them out of a tough spot and getting them, keeping them in the hunt for a chance to win the tournament, I suppose. Mark Steckety took 5 for 17 from 4. It was a 10-ball over to start his night. 2 wickets. I mean, it was absolute dross, but he still managed to get 2 wickets in the over and ended up with 5 for 17. That was the other noteworthy performance there. And the Scorchers were Scorchies, knocked over for 97 tonight after Constas made 53 from 42 for the Thunder. So they'll almost certainly be in the semi-finals. The other man who made his mark in the Big Bash over the weekend was one Stephen Peter Devereux-Smith. Seems like he always does this, Jeff. He comes back from international duty and rattles off a ridiculous 100. I mean, he's not in the Aussie T20 side anymore. No. Probably says a little bit about how little we pay attention to these things at times, that like it's fallen off my radar, just like how out of sorts, how out of favour he's been. He's not been in the last 4 IPLs. He's been overlooked in all 4 auctions. Wasn't in the World Cup squad last year. Still plays in the MLC. But, Smith saying there through his bat and through his words that he wants to keep going, wants to play short-form cricket after he retires from long-form cricket, and wants to be an Olympian at age 39 in 2028 in Los Angeles, Jeff.
Well, yeah, I mean, that was the most interesting part of it. That's a long way away. And he was trying to shift things around with the Australian team before that T20 World Cup, where they gave him a couple of goes opening the batting and that sort of thing. But there's such a logjam opening, and it's just that his versatility is there, but the relentless power game isn't as relentlessly powerful as some other players. So you square him up against some of the other options for the Australian side, and there's almost always an argument you can make that somebody else should be there that hasn't. They didn't make that move for years. They kept putting off doing that because there was kind of a respect, Stephen Peter deference Smith, if you will, paid to him, that he was the great player of the generation. So he had to play if he wanted to play. And they did finally make the move to push him out of that side. So I find it hard to see him coming back into the Australian side. I suppose it's possible, but maybe for an Olympic situation, who knows? I mean, they'll get limited opportunities at Olympic Games, so you'd be bloody sure that Australia would be going there wanting to make sure they win the gold medal, because it's not guaranteed that cricket will stay in the games. Yeah. But, why not have an aspiration? I like that he said, because there's been a lot of, maybe he'll retire soon kind of stuff for probably 3 or 4 years now. I like the idea that he's going, no, I still want to be wearing national colours in, not just in another year or two, but in another, bloody hell, how far is that off? 2028.
3 years away.
That takes in the next Ashes in England as well. So, I'd like to see him go around England one more time.
It would be interesting. So he made 121 not out from 64 balls, his third Big Bash 100. He strikes at 146 in his tournament. So there is something about him being liberated or unlocked when he finishes a test series, goes to the Big Bash, just for a quick window. Like, he didn't get let in last year. Remember, there was the block on him playing. But yeah, like in summary, it's like when he goes back into that, he's just unshackled for some reason. Yeah. Well, it does stand to reason.
He knows he only has to bat for 15 overs and he can play some shots.
Yeah. At the top of the list as well. So that's the Big Bash as it stands at the moment, Jeff. We should, we'll take one more break at this point and then we'll go off to finish off our program for today. Before going to it, I'll remind you the show's also brought to you by CBUS Super, an award-winning super fund, proud to be recognised as one of the best performing super funds in Australia. Check out their awards and ratings at cbussuper.com.au/campaign/awards. And of course, they have advice designed to help you as well. So a range of services to help you make the right decisions about your super, not just about like picking them and dumping your money with them. They can help you with how you make your investment decisions, and how you do that is all over the phone, no extra cost. And if you need that broader advice, they refer you to an accredited financial planner, not one of those fucking cowboys, the proper people who are administered and accredited to do that type of thing. They're the people who work with CBUS. And that also goes to their fees as well. They're run to benefit members, industry super funds like CBUS, and you're only charged the admin and investment fees needed to manage the account. That's why they're kept as low as possible. And recently they lowered their weekly admin fee as well. cbussuper.com.au. Take a look at them in 2025. Their past performance is not a reliable indicator of future performance. We'll be back in a moment.